Okay, welcome everybody. I'll kick it off with the land acknowledgement. Waterfront Toronto acknowledges that the land upon which we're undertaking our revitalization efforts is part of the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, the Wendat people, and is now home to diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. We also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. So with that, everybody's seen the agenda. Can I get a motion from someone to approve that agenda, please? Thanks, Drew. Seconded.
Second it. I'll second it, Kevin. It's Jeannie.
Okay. Any declarations of conflicts?
No.
Okay. So we have a fulsome agenda today. Gonna take the highlights of the key messages as read. There's a number of things for approval today, mostly in the ordinary course, the annual audit plan, the delegation of authority, and our mandate, obviously, and then the external audit plan. So we'll go through each of those. A lot of updates on PLFP, and a tremendous amount has happened down there over the last 3 months since we gathered. So we'll have update there and the potential risks on delay that I'm sure we'll delve into in a lot more detail. But with that, why don't I turn it over to Lisa, and let's talk about the Farm Committee work plan and our annual mandate review, which we have to approve at this meeting.
Thanks, Kevin, and good morning, everyone. So in terms of the Farm Committee work plan, this is consistent with the prior years in that it maps out the quarterly committee meetings that we've got planned for the year to the responsibilities that are laid out in the mandate, and that's to ensure everything, all the key areas are covered off by the committee throughout the year. So that is there for approval by the committee. In addition to that, and in line with good governance, the mandate of the committee is to be reviewed annually. The last review, some of you will recall, was completed last year, and we made quite a few updates at that time. It did receive a substantive review and update, as did all the committee mandates. So the management doesn't propose any changes to the committee at this time. Happy to hear any that may be proposed by the committee, but from management side, we're not proposing any changes.
Okay.
Lisa, it's Jeannie here. I was just noticing, I don't know if you guys could just double check just in the various documents in the work plan and then in the mandate, there just seem to be some inconsistencies, or there's headings of things the committee's responsible for, but then they weren't highlighted. For example, it says financial planning, but then there's no, you guys kind of break it out in more detail. So it's just little things like that. I just noticed some headings and things seem to be missing or appearing in different areas, but not in other areas.
Okay, we can look at that, Jeannie. And actually, to be honest, the Farm Committee work plan is more detailed than any of the other committee work plans. It tries to map the mandate, but obviously there's some things that are misaligned, so we'll take a look at that.
Yeah. So thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, with that proviso, there's a resolution there in front of us.
Sorry, Kevin, I had a quick question for Lisa and others. Just in the mandate, I didn't see reference to the ESG responsibility and reporting or that component of the mandate, but I know it's part of the mandate, and we have.
It is there, and Charmaine, maybe if you could go to the mandate.
Michael, it's in the work plan. Yeah, point A3.
It's if you can just go to the mandate, Charmaine.
Yeah, I guess I was referring to the other.
The actual mandate. Yeah, it's not clear.
The environmental and social, right?
Yeah.
It's
yeah, sorry. I mentioned the
next page. Just keep scrolling up.
I was looking at the purpose section, and it all talks about financial reporting, like the purpose of the committee. That's kind of where I was.
It's under the general responsibilities. So it has a section, duties and responsibilities of the committee, and then A, general responsibilities, the committee will, and then it's under item 4. Report and make recommendations periodically to the Board of Directors and any other applicable committee of the board on the matters covered by this mandate, including without limitation matters related to environmental, social, and governance considerations.
Okay, great. Thanks. I was looking at the purpose section, but that's great. Thanks so much.
That's okay. There's lots of volume of material here, that's for sure.
Michael, were you thinking that should be elevated more or highlighted more instead of kind of buried in general?
I mean, my own view is this is going to become more and more prevalent, and we do have the climate dashboard, and we have discussions. I think we saw discussions in the audit plan about, what does climate reporting look like in the future? Although, today it's not prevalent, but it's probably going to fall under financial reporting in some form at some time. And that I was just looking at in the purpose section, but maybe it's okay for now, given the regulators haven't mandated
Kevin,
this, and maybe.
Can I just, maybe a suggestion is if you go to page 8, which is the that kind of that table work plan, under A3 review and report on ESG, and it says as required. Is that something that we should flag as something that's done like in a certain quarter every year? Yeah, it's point A3. Right now it says as required. Just an idea.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good point. It really means there's lots of touch points related to that. So so for example, the integrated annual report would be the biggest one of the year, which comes under B5 there. So we can make some amendments if it makes it clearer, just to show that's looked at basically every quarter. There's climate risk on our enterprise risk register, for example. There's DE&I reflected in our risk. There's elements of ESG everywhere. So the as required was kind of really to tick off it's covered quarterly throughout a broad range of materials. So we could just put X's on every quarter if you like, Jeannie. That would be the other way to look at it.
So the other thing we could look at, Michael and Jeannie, is that as Lisa pointed out, one of the big shifts we had is we actually integrated the environmental sustainability report with the annual report. We should make that maybe a little more, because it is highlighted as part of that joint report. We can highlight that plus the ongoing reporting through various, maybe we use the word various instruments as opposed to or various reports as opposed to as required, because
yeah, I was thinking the same thing, George. It really has surfaced in the last couple of years, I think, right? It's so prominent now in the storyline, including, which, thank you for the copies I got the other day.
So maybe what we'll agree to then is to go back and highlight that more in those sections, both on the annual report, the integrated annual report, and just to indicate that it is reported quarterly through a variety of different reports.
Yeah, let's get ahead of it and show leadership in it rather than waiting for governments to tell us. We need to focus on it more.
All right, Lisa, we're good.
Okay.
Yep, thank you.
Healthy discussion around that. Subject to those provisos, can I get a motion to accept the work plan and annual mandate review?
I'll move that, Kevin. It's Jeannie.
Thanks. And I'm happy to second, Kevin.
Okay. Terrific. At this point, we need to approve the draft minutes of our last open session from November. Trust everyone's had a chance to read those. Any comment, questions on the minutes? Hearing none, I will ask for a motion to approve those minutes. Thanks, Drew. Seconded. All in favor? Okay, those are carried. Okay, back to you then, Lisa, on the macro dashboard, things you want to highlight. I know there's one new risk that we need to discuss, but I'll turn it over to you.
Yep. So, Charmaine, maybe if you could go to page 27, which I think might be the next page. There's no substantial change from last quarter in terms of the colors of the pie graphs on this macro dashboard. However, it should be noted that with respect to the capital projects pie at the bottom, the utility relocation risk we've been flagging with respect to schedule may now result in the project being completed later in the calendar year of 2024 versus the March 2024 baseline schedule that we had previously reported. And David, our Chief Project Officer, will be able to discuss this further under item 6 when we get to the Portland Flood Protection Project. So that's all I wanted to highlight on this. There are individual dashboards that support this macro dashboard that I would like to note a couple of things. Three items. One is relates to the corporate plan performance dashboard. Charmaine, if you go to page 28, it's the next page. It's hard to see there, but right at the bottom we show how we're tracking against our corporate operating budget. Our corporate operating budget is about 20 million a year, and that relates to our budget for our staff, our office lease, IT, corporate communications, audits, etc. We wanted to bring to your attention that we're forecasting to come in up to 10% under budget for this fiscal year, which is almost $2 million, largely due to HR, in particular due to attrition, delays in hiring some roles, such as in fundraising, as well as freezing compensation for senior employees. And then we've also, in addition to HR, gathered some savings from the working from home situation. So we wanted to just highlight that for the committee.
So Lisa, maybe I'll just add to that. One of the things that has contributed to that, and I've reported this in previous committees, is that we held off in filling all of the positions, we were anticipating some direction from the strategic review by the 3 levels of government, so that as we hopefully have a mandate extension with priorities set, that we would be hiring around the needs of the future. That has gone slower than we had hoped. We can't wait any longer, which is what I discussed. We'll be filling those, many of them on contract to give us flexibility, but we've been understaffed for a while, so we'll be filling those in the near future.
That's right. And Charmaine, if you could go to page 30, which is the Enterprise Risk Management Dashboard. So here we've got the same set of top 10 risks. We've actually got 20 risks. This dashboard shows 10, and then in your materials as confidential attachment, you have the full 20 risks that we're tracking with our full mitigation strategy. What I wanted to highlight was that the ERP system risk is elevated this quarter, where we are experiencing some functionality issues with our ERP system. It's largely impacting our project accounting and reporting, and it's resulting in some manual workarounds. We do have a plan in place to resolve these issues within the next 6 weeks or so, and these issues are not impacting our general ledger, so we're still able to prepare our financial statements and etc. So we wanted to highlight that we're working on it, and we expect to have it fully resolved before the year end, or around the year end. And then finally, Charmaine, if you could go to page 47, which is liquidity. So in terms of liquidity, Waterfront Toronto remains in a strong position. You can see from the consolidated cash, which is the purple line, that it does dip over the next couple of quarters. And that's as a result of closing on 2 property acquisitions, the 11 Parliament Street and the Parliament Slip, as well as continuing to work on our Quayside development and design work in advance of closing on the first 2 blocks of Quayside. You'll recall that these projects are being funded by the land sale revenues from Quayside, and we're doing work in advance of realizing revenue on that. So despite that fact, the cash is still forecast to remain above 50 million during this period. It should be noted in terms of our assumptions that the forecasts reflect what was approved by the board in the 5-year strategic plan. So any upside that we may realize from the Quayside transaction will not be reflected until such time as a project agreement has been executed. And as you know, we're in negotiations now with respect to that. And we'll also be updating our strategic plan later in the year. And then finally, in terms of the borrowing limit, you'll remember we have made a formal request to increase our borrowing limit to the 3 governments. We had City Council approval in November. The provincial and federal secretariats have have done a lot of work and made their formal submissions to their respective Treasury boards, and we are anticipating approval before around our year end, March 31st. And with that, unless there are any, sorry, Kevin?
Lisa, I was just going to say, it's Kevin. I was just going to say that obviously we haven't got an agreement yet on Quayside, and we just have an announcement, but it's fair to say, is it not, that there's, based on what we have so far, there's upside to this forecast in terms of our cash and liquidity as opposed to downside?
That's our expectation. Yeah. Hopefully it only gets better from here, from what's presented. And now I might, if it's okay, ask Sampata Shandane, our Director of Financial Management, just to give a few brief highlights on our 9 months ended interim financial statements. Sampata, are you there?
Yes, I am. Thank you very much, Lisa, and good morning, everyone. What I'm presenting are the unaudited interim financial statements for the 9 months ended December 31st, 2021. As I do every quarter, I would like to go through some of the key significant items in the statements, both the statement of financial position as well as the statement of financial activities, and then open up for questions that you may have. Charmaine, if you can just turn to page 52 of the material, which is the statement of financial position. If you look at the assets, there is an item receivables, and if notice that it is significantly higher than what it was at March 31st. Of the 104 million in receivables, approximately 86 million is from the province, which is the Portland's claim. From what we know last, that all of the due diligence on it has been completed, and this is just a matter of time before it gets realized. Another 14 million is from the city. A question was raised last time as to the city receivables. We can confirm that none of these are doubtful, and we have realized as of date almost about 8 million of the 14 million. There's about 6 million pending outstanding still, which pertain to non-PLFP projects which are not in question. The next item that I would like to look under in assets is assets under development. The increase between March 2021 and December 31st, 2021 of approximately 184 million represents our investments, or the amounts that we have spent in building under our assets under development, and most of it is Portland's. Almost 160 million of it is in Portland's. The next item under liabilities that I would like to discuss is deferred contributions. Again, a significant jump from 140 million in March 2021 to 191 million in December 2021. This is partly due to the requirement, the provincial funding requirement for Portland's, that we are required to have a certain amount of funding before we can request before we can request the funding from the province. We expect this situation to be better next year, the deferred contributions to be lower when the provincial funding, we do not have a provincial funding requirement any longer after December 2021. So we expect that these deferred contributions will be significantly lower than what we are showing right now. If I can just turn to page 53 of the material, which is the next page, which is the statement of financial activities. Again, significant items over here are revenues. From 124 million in the 9 months period, December 2020, they are at about 227 million. Again, this is, most of these revenues are a function of timing. You can notice the province, we have got 86 million, which is the provincial claim, which I also mentioned that is outstanding as of date, but again, we don't see any issues in realizing that. Out of the city, almost 70 million of the 85 million from the city, almost 70 million relates to Portland's again. Again, the 50 millions from the Government of Canada is entirely Portland's, and then we have got something under the other restricted contributions in terms of the developer contributions for public art, which are non-government. If I can just go to the same page, the net operating income, Again, this is something that is of interest. We can see that the net operating income is higher compared to last year same period, and this is primarily due to the leasing the rental revenue from Porsche, which is one of the our tenants at new tenant at one of our quayside properties, and the rent is approximately 100K a month. I should note that this net operating income is going to be slightly lower as we true up or actualize our provision for doubtful debts at the end of March, which is an annual exercise we do. There is some outstanding for outstanding receivables for Target Park, one of our parking operators at 7 Quincy, and this net income might be slightly lower, but it will still be higher compared to last year due to the addition of new properties that we are renting. One last thing I would like to do is just go to the note, page number 62 of the material, which is the note 12. I'm just checking the, actually it's page 59 of the material, my apologies. And it is the note on unrestricted surplus. Just give me a second, I'm just trying to get to the page, I lost the page. And if you look at net assets, if you look at note 12B, you will notice an unrestricted surplus of 43.3 million, which basically is all of the expenditures that we are currently funding out of our future revenues. And this ties back to the internal borrowing that we have, the slides that we have shown under liquidity and cash flow forecast as well. And again, net assets represents our equity, which is our investment in our assets and under development, but it is reduced by our deficit currently, which is 43.3 million, but this is expected to reverse as we realize the quayside revenues in Q2 of fiscal 22-23. With that, I conclude my presentations, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you may have.
I don't know if we.
No questions there, anyone? Okay. Where are we at now?
So I think the capital project dashboards we can take as read, David's
Yes, please,
presentation of the LFP later. Likewise, the quarterly procurement report and regulatory compliance reports can be taken as read unless there are any questions. And maybe I would suggest we have Ian McMullen provide a brief update on fundraising for the committee.
Sorry, Lisa, just on the regulatory litigation report, I think there was one that was material, but below the threshold. If it makes sense to speak about it now, or we can speak about it after in closed session if there's confidentiality reasons, but just wanted to get a sense of what that was.
Yeah, we can certainly speak about it in closed session. That is something that we've added as in our contingent liabilities. You see there's a note there on contingent liabilities which covers that. We don't believe it to be that it's going to land over $1 million. It's one of our developers, and so we can talk further in close, but we're going through a process of discussion and negotiation to understand the claimant further. If it has merit, we don't believe it has a significant amount of merit, but we can talk further in closed if you like.
Yep, thanks, Lisa.
Ian?
Yes. So we're executing the strategy and plan that was outlined in the report we reviewed at the last farm meeting and was approved at the board meeting before last, which is to focus our efforts on a few very high value prospects. By high value prospects, we're talking people capable of giving $25 million, of that order of magnitude. We have about 8 or 9 prospects in the pipeline and some level of dialogue. It's all very early stage. It's progressing slowly. For a number of reasons, competitive situation, our lack of contacts with high value prospects, and one thing or another, the pipeline isn't growing as fast as it might have done. So consequently, we haven't spent the money we set aside to spend if we could exploit opportunities. The one thing that is happening is we're in the final stage of the detailed negotiation of a $25 million gift that will be made by a family foundation to fund a series of art exhibitions on the sites we're building on Villiers Island. This is called the Art Trail. That gift will be presented to Mayor Tory sometime in the next few weeks. Obviously, it will remain sort of confidential until then. So, you know, it's a mixture of slow progress and one very, very important precedent that will allow us to engage a whole bunch of people in the celebration of that when it's formally announced and approved by council.
The one thing I would just add, and the whole team has done a great job, starting with Chris and Chloe, who originally created the Art Trail vision, but to Ian and the team on the fundraising, you know, the boat tours, I think were really important for people to understand, and this future gift came out of a discussion and a tour. So that they could understand what we were doing on another of our signature projects, which is the playground, destination playground. So I think it's really important that we continue that. But as Ian has pointed out, for a variety of reasons, including the pandemic, we've had some challenges in continuing having a discussion at this point in time. So we'll be back at it probably more progressively as the economy and the space opens up publicly.
Yeah, I would say what's happening isn't outside of what was discussed in the planning study.
That's right.
And we said we'd give ourselves 24 months, and we're halfway through that, to see if we can engage and five leaders. Yeah. Remember the five leaders strategy? It looks like we might have our first leader in place. Yeah. And in many ways, we've always considered Judy Matthews and her husband leaders as well, in that they gave to the Bentway, which is a shared public space adjacent to the waterfront. Yeah. So slowly, but good.
I think, Drew, you have your hand up?
Yeah, so great to have an update on this. And thank you, Ian and George. You know, I think you put your finger on it. To some extent, it's still theoretical, right? It's hard to sell something that's theoretical. I've got something else I'm working on on a board that word came up in the last few days, unless you can see it. So as you say, the tours and things like that, as well, the first mover, you know, step. So am I hearing you right that there's an announcement coming on the Art Trail? I think your point about the Matthews is key. That it really is adjacent, and we can think of it, if not a sibling, then a cousin kind of thing, and sort of building that kind of, not so much momentum as evidence that others are stepping up. So the Art Trail timing is what, a matter of, you know,
well,
once the snow's gone kind of stuff, or
it will require the way the deal is structured. It will require council approval, which we don't think is going to be an issue. The city have told us, given us guidance that it's likely not to be an issue. Full public announcement, probably 2 months. Okay, there might be a provisional announcement sooner than that.
It's also obviously an opportunity to highlight again what's going on down there, right? Because you can't get in, and it is to some extent as good as some of the, you know, the videos are and the pictures and stuff like that. It's a little, again, kind of theoretical, no fault of our own. It's just the way things are. But that'll sort of build, you know, as you say, a little bit of momentum. What about, is there any progress on the naming rights? Where's that with the city and stuff like that? It's still working its way through the muck?
No, there's a complete city embargo on naming city property at present. Yeah. For reasons related to Dundas. And I guess Ryerson got included in that as well. But yes, so there is an embargo on naming city property, and that's both city intellectual property like Nuit Blanche which is the city intellectual property, and city physical property.
As
So
they
Drew,
work their way
we've
through-
raised this up. Sorry, go ahead.
As they work their way through that, right? So
Yeah.
we're caught up in that. That's right. I forgot.
Yeah. So we're aware of it. We
Yeah.
understand, the barrier that creates for us, and we continue the dialogue.
Yeah, exactly.
It's actually a little bit practical, a practical issue for us as well, because we need to do some naming in Portlands. For example,
Yep.
Old Cherry Street can't remain Old Cherry Street because we have a new Cherry Street, and the fire department and emergency services don't want duplication in names. So we actually do need to figure out a way to get Old Cherry Street renamed this year.
That's a chuckle. Okay.
We're working with the councillor and city staff on that issue.
George will remember, it wasn't that long ago that the province, didn't tend to provide naming rights. I'm not sure there was a blanket ban on agencies and things like that. So the Ottawa Convention Center in my time, George, going back a decade, and things like that, and it's opened up a little bit. So it's not, Toronto might be, a little, further behind, or however you want to term it, but it can often be a challenge. Anyway, we're caught up in that. That's right. Okay.
I think Jeannie has her hand up. Is that correct?
Yes. Hi, everyone.
Go ahead, Jeannie.
Ian, thank you for the update. It's good to hear that we're kind of on track and on schedule based on your initial thoughts on how this would unfold. Just had a couple of questions around PR strategy. If we know that this art trail thing is going to likely, happen, and you said maybe in a couple of months we'll have an announcement, do we have an active PR strategy where we can, can we get a cover on the Toronto Life magazine, in some of the more influential publications online, in print? Is that already kind of being queued up as well, or, getting prepared?
Yeah, we've had initial internal discussions. I mean, the key thing, there are three people at this party. There's ourselves, who were the enabler and came up with the original idea for Art Trail. Many years ago, we were thinking about public art in the Waterfront. So there's ourselves, there's the donor, which is a charitable foundation, and then there's the city. We need to get those three folks around a table to decide how to handle it. But I would imagine it would be in the interests of the mayor that this get a lot of coverage. It's a good news story. Many people I've spoken to at the city already consider it to be a major good news story. But we need those three people around the table to have that serious conversation.
But are we driving the bus on that? Like somebody
Yes.
among the three should be driving that?
Yep.
Yeah, we are, Jeannie. I should just point out, I'm working with Cameron around a series of potential announcements. And, the strategy of, and Drew and others will recognize this, echo announcements to continue to remind people of the previous successes. So, obviously Quayside was the recent one. We are hoping that we might, in addition to announcement on the art trail, have the prospect of announcing funding for Parliament Slip. So we are working on a sequencing strategy and a PR strategy to support it.
Okay, great. And just a quick thought and idea around David's point about Cherry Street. Is this an opportunity where we can do some public naming competition or something, or ideas? It'll bring great PR just to what we're doing down on the waterfront. Just a thought.
Well, we would like to, but really what we're doing is only dealing with those emergency issues that we have to deal with. The rest of the naming will have to wait until the city's determined what their policies are going to be moving forward. So that will drive what we do ultimately, whether it's public naming or competitions or any other alternative solutions for how we're going to do that. Because we will have the parks to name. Villiers Island itself will likely get a different name. So we'll.
I'm just thinking these are all good touch points and opportunities, right, to get out in the media and to get us better known. So just an idea.
No, they are. City does not want that to happen until they've resolved how they're going to move forward with their naming policy.
Great, thanks.
Okay.
Drew, do you still have your hand up, or is that a new hand?
You're on mute there, Drew.
Sorry, I guess you'd call that an echo hand, as
Okay.
opposed to an echo announcement. Sorry.
Okay, let's move on to everyone's favorite topic, the COVID-19 update. Hopefully there's not too many more of these, but we'll judge that as we go. Is someone going to give this, or are we going to take it as read?
I'd like to just highlight one thing on page 91 of the material. The extreme cost escalation that we experienced in early 2021 and through 2021 on commodities, so lumber, steel, other commodities, increasing in cost anywhere from 100 to 150%, is actually now normalized. By the end of the year, both lumber and steel had returned to their pre-COVID numbers. Now, having said that, just general escalation and inflation has certainly been higher than in the last couple of years than it had been for some time, and in fact higher than the 2.5% per annum that was carried in the due diligence report. That's resulted in our probably around 40 million in additional escalation costs attaching to the project based on the escalation that we've experienced over the last 5 years. So where we had carried about 94 million based on the 2.5%, we're actually looking at calculated numbers of around 135 million. And all of that has been sourced from our contingency. So just wanted to bring that to the committee's attention.
So Kevin, I should just add that governments have reached out to me to just see where we're at with regards to the impact of COVID. As David said, it's had an impact. We're seeing a reduced risk associated with material costs going forward. But I did point out that with the high levels of inflation and labor unions will be coming up for renegotiation, that we could see an escalation in challenge on labor side.
And in fact, we may see some labor disruption this year.
Yeah. So that is something that across all sectors, we don't have a lot of control on that, but just for us to be aware that future projects may have larger labor costs. And as David said, if there are strikes, there could be disruption in the project.
Okay, any other questions there? Okay.
I just had, sorry, Kevin, I just had a follow-up. At the beginning of COVID, there's a lot of, I guess, analysis and discussion about force majeure provisions and, how does a pandemic, play into contractual interpretation and supply chain delays and a whole bunch of other things, which I'm sure you guys have lived. Just given the, things that are going on globally today with Russia and Ukraine, one thing you might want to look at is just from a force majeure provision, like most of us haven't really had to look at force majeure in the context of a pandemic or, international conflicts. The way we're seeing today might be worthwhile to look at that and also start thinking about how that impacts both, major contracts, supply chain delays, and things like that. Just, you've gone through it now with the pandemic. I suspect, kind of events of today and yesterday might make people look at contracts a bit differently as a result. So I just want to mention that.
Yeah, Michael, I would just acknowledge we are looking at that, and as we get into further discussions, and I think we presented at a previous farm, this has affected insurance policies and others throughout the system, and we take into account all those risks.
Okay. Helpful. Let's move on to BDO and our external audit plan. Who am I turning that over to?
Yeah, so I can just introduce, I believe Jeff Barrett and Rob Horse have joined us from BDO. BDO are our external auditors, and they're in the first year of a new 5-year term. So I'm pleased to turn it over to Jeff and Rob and team.
Morning, everyone. Thank you for the time today. Just going to go through our external audit plan for the fiscal 2022 audit. I assume a copy of it's in the package. I don't actually have a copy of the package in front of me. So if someone can scroll to the first page, or I can put it on screen if necessary. There we go. Next page, please. As I just mentioned, part of the importance of the Farm Committee is the approval of the financial statements, and this is information additional to the financial statements that will help management prepare. Just need your sort of approval and oversight on our planning for the audit. Skip a couple of pages, please. So that's the team. So myself, I'm the engagement partner. Rob Claus is the senior manager on the file. He's been involved for about 12 years now. He was once the junior on the file when I was the senior working in the file. So we've got lots of good historical knowledge. And we have Sanjana. She's also a senior manager, been on the team for about 5 years. And Karen Trudeau is our quality assurance partner. So every set of statements that leaves BDO gets 2 partner level reviews. Next page, please. So timeline for the audit, our field work and planning was already completed back in November 2021, presenting the plan to you guys today. Our final field work is set to start on April 25th, and we'll be presenting the draft statements along with Lisa and Sampata to you on May 26th, and approval from the board on June 23rd. Next slide, please. So just a reminder, our responsibilities are to form and express an opinion on the financial statements. They are management's financial statements. We do help them as necessary, guide them on financial statement disclosure when Lisa or Sampata has a question for us. But we are just expressing opinion on the statements, and management is ultimately responsible for the financial statements. Next slide. A bit more about our responsibilities around fraud. Obviously, we're always looking for and identifying fraud if we can, if we come across it. It is not the goal of a financial audit. This is not a forensic audit. We are looking to substantiate within materiality the balances on the financial statements. Next slide, please. So just for the committee's information, some information about what we do around fraud in terms of some of the procedures we look at in assessing management's process around controls related to fraud. At the current moment, we're not aware of any fraud affecting the organization, but if anyone on the call is aware of something that I should be made aware of, please let me know either right now or reach out to me afterwards. Thank you. Next slide, please. So our significant risks and planned responses are on the next 3 pages. So there's 2 that are standard risks at BDO, standard risks in any financial statement audit. So management override of controls, the ability for management to operate outside the controls set up for the organization. So we perform a number of different tests to ensure that the risk of that is low. And then revenue recognition, just ensuring that the appropriate revenue recognition occurs for the year. There's another point later on that we talk about deferral of grants and contributions. So that's one of the major areas, is looking at and making sure that revenue is recorded in the right period. And if it shouldn't be recorded in 2022, it's deferred appropriately. We also look at revenue recognition from a fraud standpoint as well. We can move down one more slide, please. And so some other areas of audit interest. The first 2 are set as standard risks. These are other areas of audit interest, so they're not, they don't meet the risk point threshold, but they are areas that we focus on just because of the nature of the organization. So accrued liabilities and construction deposits, because of the nature of the building that goes on, those are areas that sort of in a construction operation we tend to focus on for obvious reasons. And then because of the significant nature of the assets under development on the balance sheet, we obviously spend a specific amount of time testing that and making sure that the costs, similar to our revenue recognition between being recognized and deferred, are the costs capitalized or are they recognized as an expense during the year, and making sure that based on the different projects that they're recorded in the appropriate place. And then contribution agreements, we review every contribution agreement that that the organization enters into to make sure we understand sort of the nature and the particulars of it. Next slide. So I mentioned, the deferral of contributions and grants. COVID-19, obviously, hopefully, as someone just mentioned, hopefully it's coming to an end, but we do obviously assess the impact of COVID-19 on the organization and make sure any financial statement disclosure that management has included is appropriate. And then climate disclosures, there was some conversation about it earlier on the call, but something that Lisa, Sampata, Rob, and I had a conversation about earlier on. From a financial statement reporting standpoint, there's currently no requirements under PSAB and no requirements on the horizon under PSAB. Obviously, that doesn't stop the organization from doing any sort of disclosure, whether it be in the statements or in your reports. But as of right now, nothing is required. Next slide. So our materiality for the year is $4 million, and that's based on 2% of the average expenditures for the last 3 years. So a couple comments around that. We're using the average expenditures for the last 3 years to try to remain consistent year over year with our materiality. Also not to have any significant drops or increases just based on the spend during a year. And so we use average expenditures, but that also includes the money spent on assets under development as well. So that does get included. And $4 million is not the highest that we could go. It's sort of in the mid-range of the threshold. We could go up to 3% of expenditures based on CPA standards. So, my comfort level based on our sort of risk-based approach at BDO, our risk profile of the organization, we didn't want to start trending that materiality up too high. But obviously the farm committee, any comments on materiality are always welcome. Next slide. Yeah, so I'm not going to go through the remainder of the document. I'm happy to answer any questions on our process, but the rest of it sort of speaks to, how we audit the financial statements, our actual process, a bit more detailed information on some of the tools and techniques we use and some of the technology that we now have in play for our audits. And then there's some additional information at the end in terms of articles, things related to best practices, related to sustainability that, if anyone's interested in, can go and look at. And we've also got the engagement letter in there for your review. It's been signed. As Lisa said, we're under a new contract now. And then the last appendice is our PSAB update. So updates for 2021, end of 2021 PSAB update from BDO. Just anything of interest in there that the committee might want to look through. So happy to answer any questions.
If just on the materiality question, I know it's a bit subjective, and but are we consistent with other public boards that you guys are monitoring, just so that we know?
Yeah, on the public, I mean, I do a number of public sector things, some things directly for the Auditor General of Ontario, to be honest with you, and I tend to leave materiality a little lower than the high level of the threshold just because of the public nature of the organizations. Just gives me and BDO some added comfort, and I assume the Farm Committee and other audit committees a bit of added comfort. I don't think increasing materiality would simply affect the amount of work we would do in terms of a cost savings or a time savings for my team or Lisa's team. So I think to be prudent, setting it, 2% used to be the high end of the range. A couple of years ago, CPA Canada allowed us to move it up to 3%, and we've remained consistent. One of the things for your organization specifically is, as the costs change from year to year, if we increase materiality too high this year and costs go down next year, we actually end up being required to do a bunch of work on opening balances to next year's materiality levels. So we're cognizant of that too from an overall efficiency standpoint from year to year.
Kevin, it's Jeannie here. I just have a question for Jeff. Hi, Jeff.
Hi, Jeannie. How are you?
Thank you so much. Good. How are you doing?
Pretty good.
Thanks for the overview. I just had a question. Being optimistic that we're going to start having money coming in through Ian's philanthropy work, is there anything special we need to do or add to the audit work that you guys do to manage that?
Not to add to the audit work we do. I mean, it'll be tracked separately. There'll be likely restricted contributions, obviously, so we'll make sure that that sort of falls into the deferral work that we do already, making sure that it's not being recognized until the costs are being spent for whatever specific purpose the charitable giver has outlined with that money.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thanks.
Are there any non-audit services contemplated for this upcoming year for BDO?
No. We complete the audit only. From an independent standpoint, we don't do anything else for the organization.
Great.
And I guess I can confirm our independence as well. It's not actually in our planning letter. We issue a full independence letter at the end of the audit, but BDO on all of our related entities are independent of Waterfront Toronto.
Great, thanks, Jeff.
Thank you.
Okay, I guess we now have to approve the external audit plan as outlined by Jeff here. I'm not sure, do we actually approve the engagement letter as well, Ian, or is that part of our mandate?
Just, I believe it's just the plan.
Yep.
Okay, the motion's there. Can I have someone make the motion to approve the external audit plan for 2022?
I'll move that, Kevin. It's Jeannie.
Yep. Thanks, Jeannie. Seconded. All in favor? Okay. That's carried. We're going to talk about DLFP now, our favorite, another great subject of tons of activity down there. So look forward to your update, David.
Thanks, Kevin. So if we can move to page 146, Charmaine, we'll start there. So the Rocky radar here showing that excavation is now complete in essentially all areas except for the minor bit of work left in the elbow and the area under Commissioner's Street Bridge. So that work will all be complete by the end of fiscal year, so by the end of March, and beginning in April, we'll begin to see finishes in the River Valley areas, because we've already seen some finishes, but we'll actually start seeing planting in the Central River Valley and in the Don Greenway starting this spring planting season. Next.
Hey, David.
Yes.
Quickly ask, in the corner of that there's a hashtag @TheRockRipper. What exactly is that? I'm just curious.
So that's Rocky the Rock Ripper. Rocky has been our spokesperson on Twitter, bit tongue-in-cheek for the project for the last couple of years. It's an excavator bucket that was used to trench one of the slurry walls that you can see outlined in green here. So we, Rocky, the bucket posts photos and interesting bits of information to Twitter and has about 1,000 followers, and is just one of the many ways we try to keep in touch with the public.
So it's basically a social media hashtag, right? So,
It is.
Yeah. Okay.
Next page. So this is our, it's called a propeller view. We do this, try to do this once a month, although we didn't get one done in January or February because the snow essentially rendered the details immaterial. We will in March get an updated propeller view. So we do these, normally do these monthly, showing the progress of the work across the site. You can see the site now extends from Coxwell and Lakeshore Boulevard in the top right to Cherry Street, beyond Cherry Street, top left, and then down to the ship channel at Cherry Street and the Don Roadway at the bottom. Next. Just for information, so the as you're aware, the Cherry Street Bridge arrived. It is in the last week been put on its foundations. Commissioner Street Bridge continues to be worked on to complete the finishing. A risk that has just materialized for us, however, on the Cherry Street North Bridge is that one of the recent storms in Nova Scotia has damaged the Quonset hut, the painting shed that the bridge contractor was using to paint the Cherry Street Bridge. So that needs to be repaired, and at the same time, the supplier of the paint has been having production issues as a result of COVID, and the paint is somewhat delayed. So we're working now to determine what the impact may be. We don't foresee that bridge coming until May, and we may be able to get it painted and on the barge before then, but we're not 100% sure right now. So we're tracking that risk with the bridge builder. Next. Some photos. Here's the arrival of the Cherry Street Bridge. There was a board and governments had a little PR event in the middle of December for that. Next. Some other photos of the bridge. It came in 3 pieces that have been welded together now, and as I said early last week, the bridge was moved to its foundations over the river. Next. Keep going. Lots of bridge pictures. This is the Commissioner Street Bridge, doing a ice test on it to determine, what happens when the if ice forms on that curved roof, if you will. What we don't want ice falling on the road and creating a hazard. So doing some analysis to see what happens when and if ice forms and where that ice goes. Next. You can see here we're planting a drowned tree. It's not drowned yet, won't be drowned until we open the river up, but it is one of the features of the wetlands that are being constructed and will provide both fish habitat as well as bird habitat once completed. Next. On the left-hand side of the picture are one of the FES lifts, so that's where the soil is wrapped in essentially in burlap and then planted, and that burlap keeps the soil from flowing away once there is water in the river, and also protects the plants until they are rooted in place. Next. And these are all post December 31st pictures, as you can tell, because I don't think we've had a day without snow since then. Just a couple of photos of the foundations for the one of the pedestrian bridges that crosses over the river. So there is a way to pass across the river from Promontory Parks, or sorry, not Promontory Park, but River Park south to north and vice versa. Next. I mentioned the excavation, so this is elbow excavation. That work is continued through the winter and will be done by the end of March. Next. Work is now commencing the sediment and debris management area. This is the removal and dismantling of the cycling bridge crossing the Don River. The contractor has mobilized, and dock wall work and dredging will commence in the very next short while. Excuse me. Next. The other mobilization that has happened is the Lakeshore Bridge. So we will be in the next week rerouting traffic to the eastbound bridge. So both east and westbound, the westbound bridge, east and westbound traffic will be co-located on that bridge, and we will dismantle the eastbound bridge that you can see here and begin to construct the new widened and lengthened Lakeshore Bridge beginning in the next 2 weeks. Next. Part of the rerouting is rerouting traffic on Lakeshore, so we can also begin the reconstruction of Lakeshore Boulevard. So contracts have been awarded for that, for initial site excavation and utility relocations. Next. I'm not going to get into details, but just some information on what work is happening and beginning now, and obviously things will pick up markedly in April when the spring comes, and we'll be working across the site. Next. I'll let this be taken as read. Important note here, with 80% of the total program awarded as at December 31st. Another 16% in progress, with only 5% yet to begin. So that's showing that by the end of March we should have well over 90% of the project procured, and remove and reduce our risks related to the market. Next. Again, won't get into a lot of detail. Next. You can see we've got, we're tracking complaints and issues that are being raised on site with respect to the Portland's flood protection project, mostly having to do with odor and dust as excavation continues. With respect to the Lakeshore Boulevard project, majority of the comments, questions, and concerns that we're receiving from the public have to do with traffic for obvious reasons. So we continue to work with the city and we'll continue to monitor on a daily basis the traffic and implement whatever changes are possible with respect to traffic signal and traffic movements to try to keep the traffic moving as well as we can, given the work that we need to do. Next.
David, on the traffic, if I can just add, is it true that some of the traffic complaints are also based on work not directly related to us, but in the surrounding area in terms of other construction?
They are both directly and indirectly, because we took into account everything that we knew about with respect to other work that was going on when we did our plan. We didn't have all of that information. There is now, and there will be more traffic disruption due to the work that's now beginning on the Ontario line, as well as other projects within the city. So we have to take that into account, because areas that we thought may be available for traffic to divert to are less available, because those routes have become construction zones or being used by condominiums.
Yeah, I just wanted the board to understand that some of the complaints are outside of our control, but they were potential access points for us that are no longer there.
Yeah.
Or challenging, anyhow.
More challenging. So it's a living program with respect to traffic mitigation, and we're working closely with the councillor's office as well as with the city transportation to minimize the impact of the work that we're going to be doing over the next 30 months or so. With respect to engagement with Indigenous communities, we continue to work with the Mississaugas of the Credit as well as other communities with respect to both work on site as well as design and ultimately, Jeannie, naming. We have engaged with and will continue to engage with the First Nations community on naming opportunities. So I don't think there's anything clearly to add. The next major milestone will be awarding the contracts for some of the PLFP or some of the public realm design and installations that we are now out to tender for with the First Nations community. Next. And then communications, you see on the left, over the winter, the Cherry Street South Bridge arriving. We've got some road openings that are going to happen beginning this year. Quite a number of, planting will begin this year. The bridges will all have been arrived, so it's, and we'll start to see some activities on Lakeshore Boulevard and in the sediment management area. So a lot happening this year, and there will be some both potential for groundbreakings as well as ribbon cuttings as we open some of the existing roads, or reopen the existing roads. And I think this is the last slide, so a good time to talk about appropriate time to talk about the schedule. The Yellowstone's December schedule, it shows approximate 3-week delay to substantial completion from the March 2024 substantial date, completion date in the contribution agreement. Subsequent to that, Yellowstone have identified additional schedule risk, specifically related to utility and services installations in the roads. So just to give a bit of context, we need those utilities and services to be completed in order to be able to do the finishing the roads and open up the new Cherry Street and Commissioner Street to traffic. We need those roads opened up in order to be able to close down existing Cherry Street where it crosses the river, so that we can excavate and construct the west plug. And we need to be able to open Commissioner Street in order to close Villiers Street to allow us to excavate and construct the north plug. The west and north plugs are critical elements to the project insofar as they will determine when we're able to open up the river, both to the inner harbor as well as to the Don River. And as a result of the delays, and we've now been able to better define those delays, Ellis Don are doing a new analysis or reanalyzing the schedule, working with BTY, and Luis will talk a bit about that. We expect that work to be done over the next 4 to 6 weeks to identify what the total impact is likely to be. We are expecting there to be somewhere between a 60 and 90-day potential delay to achieving flood protection. So that's specifically opening up the north plug, and potentially 180-day delay to doing the final finishing in the parks. Specifically, that relates to being able to complete the planting. We won't be able to complete, we don't think, in the spring planting season, which ends in June, which means that there will be planting that needs to be done in the fall. Having said that, as I mentioned, there will still be, openings of various parts and pieces of the project, over the course of the next 6 months as well as beyond that. So we are doing that analysis. We'll work with BTY as we finish it, and then report back to the Farm Committee and the board at our next opportunity as to where we think the schedule is going to actually fall out with respect to both flood protection as well as substantial completion.
So Kevin, the only thing I would add is obviously we're looking at what that delay and extension of time would be required in terms of the contribution agreement. Governments have let us know, the earlier the better, that if we can let them know. I've asked David, though, to be certain that the amount of extension is long enough, because what I don't want to do is go back to governments twice. So, hopefully in the next few months, we'll have a better idea. We'll work with governments to get that extension. And as I said, I'd like to make sure the extension gives us a little more room so that if there's any further delays, we don't have to go back to governments again.
Okay. And I note that the contingency has fallen very little, despite all the work that's done. I think we're down, what, David, about $1 million to the $42 million level from the last quarterly report?
That's correct. In terms of actual contingency utilization, we're more or less where we were in 2020, November, December 2020. We are forecasting, and we do a forecast update at EAC every month. So we're forecasting at this point that we're going to be utilizing probably about 40 to 50% of that contingency, just based on costs and risks that we know of today. However, we continue to monitor it literally on a daily basis as we make these commitments and assess risks as they happen, and they continue to we continue to identify risks and continue to realize and in fact retire risks on a regular basis. So our next update on the EAC, we will update the risk register, redo the risk quantification, and do another update on the estimate of completion, as well as update the schedule, and that will be coming to the next Farm Committee as we complete that in the end of March and April.
David, it's Jeannie here. Thank you for that great update. Quick question about on risk. Given the current inflationary environment, and God knows where that's going to go, is there any risk to contracts that have already been awarded where people may come back and say, hey, we need more money because of, material costs have gone up or anything like that, or are those pretty much locked in?
They're locked in for the scope of work that the contractors are obligated to undertake, and they are locked in where we have identified and are working with unit rates, where the contracts may be expanding for whatever reason, or there's additional work required that wasn't contemplated in the initial pricing, there's a potential that we'll see some escalation in those costs, but as far as the basic scope of work that we have contracted for, we don't have any risk with respect to the costs going up.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you.
David.
Yep.
David, have the yardsticks changed before with regard to timelines? This doesn't seem like a major step, and I know we had a long conversation about, a couple of the processes potentially lead to this at the last meeting, but I think will come up again. But remind me, please, of the original date and things like this. Is this the first time they've moved?
It is. The original date is unchanged, and that is currently unchanged. March 2024 is what is specified in the contribution agreement with the 3 levels of government. So we have been maintaining that date up until literally this quarter.
And, as well, they're on the call. Government's fully informed on this, and they're on the call, but previously as well. Okay.
Yeah, we have let them know that we're looking at the schedule and that we've already identified potential risks. So.
Right.
Yeah, my only comment, more of a comment than a question, David, it just occurred to me in listening to your complaint monitoring around congestion and other things. It really does highlight our need for a PR strategy down there. We still have this perception that, it's just a mess, and I don't think we've done a good job of getting people to really understand the significant amount of work that's been going on down there and the progress that's being made. And how major a project this is. And I think things like the art walk, which is going to be a really positive announcement, are going to highlight some of the positive things that are going down there. So I just encourage everyone to really think carefully about those things, because we're getting close to that time where we really need to change the perception about what's happening on the waterfront. And as George pointed out earlier, the boat tours and other things for that limited number of people that really have changed the perception and stimulated philanthropy. Needs to be part of an overall strategy as we go forward. And I know it is, but I just wanted to highlight it again.
Mm-hmm. Can I just add to Kevin's point? Can you remind me or remind us, do we have a PR agency retained for Waterfront Toronto?
I'm going to let...
You know what, Cameron's on the...
Yeah, I'm going to let Cameron speak to it.
Cameron, are you there?
Yeah, no, I'm muting. We actually have 3 agencies. They're actually up for renewal. We have Bespoke, and we have Argyle, and we have Bob Lipinski's firm, whose name escapes me, and we use him most often. So those are the firms we've used. Bespoke, we don't have an agency of record for advertising, but Bespoke is the agency we use for most of our creative. Some of our media placements. So, and I would just add it to Kevin's point. Yesterday, my team and I sat down and we went through an inventory of 8 upcoming events and looked at linkages between and among them. I think the art trail, and just to address the comment by Drew, it is kind of gauzy and it is hard to get your head around, but I do believe that the ball has rolled in our direction as a destination for art. And there's much to recommend that art trail from walking through nature, plus artists and OCAD and Luminato, and there'll be all kinds of people who can see themselves being able to exhibit in that space. So we think that there's an attractive constituency on that. And with respect to the disruption of PLFP and for the governor taking up, we are taking, and as the world opens up again, we're taking the PLFP to other people. So Ellis Dawn and our team is working on a container, kind of a shipping container to take to events. We talked about a food festival, for example. It's hard to get into the PLFP area because it's under construction, but we've made a concerted effort, inhibited albeit by COVID, to go to science fairs, to take science fairs, to take this, and then we'll take this on the road with the new shipping container. We're going to be opening up an observation deck, which will allow people to see PLFP. As I mentioned, I think at our last board meeting, David and the team convened a terrific discussion with the city councilors on the Lakeshore impacts. And there was, once you unpack what's happening for people, and it was about 400 or 500 people on the call, they really get it, and they say they're prepared to suffer through this because they see a brighter future at the end of the tunnel. So your points are all very well made, but we are knitting together an integrated campaign that leverages off all of these announcements and builds on them. So
the other
sorry,
thing
Cameron, why do we have 3 PR agencies?
Well, because we have with their vendors of record. So we will often have 3 agencies. Sometimes they're conflicted out on assignments. So it's not uncommon, like we would have several law firms on event agency of record.
Kevin, the only thing I would add too is it's interesting. Sometimes we have greater visibility internationally than we have domestically. I was talking to a newly appointed European Consul General who met with me, who was stationed in South America and Central America, and he indicated that in meetings in Rio de Janeiro and in Chile, when he announced that he'd be coming to Toronto, one of the big statements that he heard from some of the businesses and political people in that jurisdiction is the great project that's being done at the flood protection project in the Portlands. So, you know, I think we have lots of international recognition of what's going on, but to the point that the board is making, we've got to do more on the domestic side to make sure that the local community knows what we're doing to, first of all, mitigate the challenges they have on transportation, et cetera, but the vision that we have collectively and what they'll see at the end of the day.
Okay, and please take it that none of the points that anyone's making is that you're not doing all of this. We're just stressing the importance, and I know you guys are on top of it, but it continues to be an issue that we face. So, any other questions? Was at the end of your report, David?
Yeah. I think part of the challenge is that the land itself is still terra incognita, right? And so I think the art trail, helps on a subset of the big project. It gets us moving in the direction that Ian's been pushing, but it's just a small part of the development down there, right? And part of the challenge is that people don't know the before. And unless you're in the film business, or you tended to cycle down there, or go at one of the clubs or something, like, people don't go down there, and the city's actually moving in that direction. So how we tell that story, in some ways it should be sort of intuitive, but it's a little challenging. We've had some good coverage lately, attention, including last week, obviously, but not just that. We should think about how we get that word out. And Cameron, as Kevin says, you guys are thinking about that, but I'm struck by it too.
Drew, the only thing I'd say is, yesterday I was part of a panel on how to improve, the future of the waterfront with Anna Baila, the deputy city mayor, and Gervin from George Brown. Yeah. We had a session, a VIP session afterwards too, and I talked a bit about the difference that people have in perspective on what we've done on the waterfront when they see it from the water. I do think we need to do more of using the opportunity to visibly look at what has transpired over the last 20 years, looking from the water. Too often, we look downtown, we don't look on the water or towards the city from the water. I think, and the media that I was talking to are very interested in, when we get a chance, to do more tours in the future and to tell that story from a visible perspective, looking for the water, because I think that's where you see how it all fits together. Because certainly in our philanthropy tours, there was a much better reaction when people actually saw from the water and saw how it all links together. So I think not only from a PR strategy, but I think we've learned a few lessons as to what perspective we want to give the public so that they get a better recognition of how this all fits together too.
I agree with that. Like our own boat tour was helpful, right? Yeah. And what we're doing is we're moving from a development of the central waterfront that was really to a sizable extent for the residents in the end, to, you know, a development on the eastern waterfront, or use your terminology, around the corner, as I say, you know, that's going to be much more publicly facing, right? And the more people we can get down there, including, you know, sort of influencers and things like that, as well as philanthropists, the better off we are. I get a kick out of what you mentioned, Cameron, with the observation tower. But I found the boat tour invaluable to give a sense of it. People aren't out on the water, the vast majority of them, right? I mean, you know, everybody's not a member of the RCYC, right? So, and even partially this because it links back to one of our 4 signature projects, which is the development of Jack Layton. You know, people don't go to, you know, don't take the ferry as much as they might because it's just not as good an experience as they might have. It all links together, right? Yeah.
Okay, healthy discussion. And congratulations on a great update down there. Let's move to the delegation of authority. This is an approval matter, more in the housekeeping, but I think it's fairly self-explanatory. We do this annually as a matter.
Kevin.
Yep.
Kevin, I think the next item on the agenda is actually BTY, and BTY are here.
Oh, I'm sorry. I completely missed that. You're right.
6B, yep, report of the independent capital monitor.
Right. It says David on my agenda as opposed to BTY. So, and we have a change of personnel there. So I apologize for that oversight.
No worries. So if I might speak, thank you very much. Well, a couple of things. One, as you guys are aware, we have some changes in our team. Joan Henson is no longer with us, and now Mary Foley is going to take some of her responsibilities. She's Director of Infrastructure for BTY. She's been for many years in the company, and she's going to be leading the team. I'm going to continue giving support as it has been in the last year to the project. So business as usual with somebody new. She's aware of the project itself. She actually participated in the last report we issued, so she knows the current status. With us is also Gord Smith, one of the directors of BTY. Just pretty much, I wanted to introduce you to them, just to let you know that we are working as a team, and we do have all the resources available to continue with our job. On top of that, I want to make a couple of comments. When David has actually mentioned several things about the schedule. That's one of the concerns that we have in our report, but it's understandable that it's currently being re-baselined and it's being redeveloped just based on new findings. The concerns about the substantial completion date, and we understand that the utility relocation is playing a major role on this, reassessment of the substantial completion date. So we will monitor. We unfortunately didn't receive an update on the schedule for this, but we have been discussing with David's team and with Ellis Dunn, and we have our scheduler constantly talking to them in order to provide a hand and to provide our knowledge and expertise to help somehow develop this schedule. Moving to the budget itself, we got the latest estimates that we're missing to complete the 90% estimate, and we got we're pretty much okay with that. Just a couple of concerns, a couple of projects that are actually lower in the current budget than the actual estimate. We had discussions with David's team, and the reason is that we are hoping to get the results that are actually lower, and that's what it's aiming. No major concerns though, but just to let you know, we do have we are monitoring the situation. We know the contingency will eventually be used to cover these minor differences, but so far it seems reasonable, and we will keep just monitoring and comment in our next report. Other than that, as before mentioned, we still believe every single thing is being followed in accordance to best practices. We have an open communication with the PMO, so we think everything is being told to us and is transparent. So if there is anything, we will certainly comment in our next report. And that's it from our side.
Okay, any questions there? Luis, please pass on to Joanne our thanks for her years of service to this committee.
Absolutely, I will. She was great, and actually, just before she left, she had a little minor accident, so she was really sad she couldn't be in the last discussions we had. But thank you. I'll communicate your message to her.
Thank you. Any other questions for BTY before we let them go? Okay. Now back to my premature delegation of authority. As I was saying, it's a pretty standard item. I'm not sure we need much discussion on it. It's a matter of governance. Any questions before I move for the resolution?
Yeah, Kevin, just a question on that. If I read it right, it looked like HR matters like terminations of even C-suite, like other than CEO, would not go to the board. I typically would see like anyone in the C-suite, if they were terminated, would go to the board instead of just CEO. But if I misread that, then it was just a question.
That has been our policy, Michael, previously. That's not a change, that the CEO has responsibility for terminations of all staff below that CEO role. I would expect though, George, you would communicate with the.
Yeah, I would definitely be communicating with the board, and I give a full disclosure of any, first of all, the performance of our C-suite at the June meeting when we're doing performance compensation awards, and I identify any issues with regards to individuals that I may have to deal with. So I think historically, for those people who've been on the board for a while, I'm very transparent and open, and I would seek not approvals, but certainly input on any decisions I'm making.
And I guess, has this policy gone to the HR committee as well for approval?
That is consistent with the current HR mandate, which was actually I think it's been carried over for a couple of mandates, but it's certainly consistent with the mandate that was approved last year.
So the real changes have been really housekeeping changes, as Lisa said. That has not changed. What has changed are, for example, everything has to be kind of signed by me, while I'm here. But if I go on vacation, there's no provision for them to have my signing authorities, etc. So there's some housekeeping issues that are in here. But the point that you just made has always been, and it has been approved by the HR committee in previous discussions.
Got it. Okay. Thanks, George.
Okay, can I get that motion then from someone?
Sure, I will, Stuart.
I can second.
Okay. if I'm correct, we just need a motion now to go into the closed session. Is that where we're at? Ian?
Correct.
Okay,
I'll move that, Kevin, as Jeannie.
okay, thanks, Jeannie. Seconded, okay.
To do so.
Okay. Thanks, Drew. Seconded, all in favor?
I'll second it. Yeah.
I have no further comments. Unless anyone has anything to add, I would take the motion to adjourn the meeting. Exactly the 2.5 hour mark is good, actually.